For over half a century, Dr. Charles Stanley stood at the pulpit of First Baptist Church Atlanta, becoming one of the most trusted and influential voices in American Christianity. His sermons reached millions, his writings guided generations, and his broadcasts touched hearts across the globe. Even years after his passing, his legacy of faith and leadership continues to shape lives, proof that his impact did not end with his final sermon, but lives on in the countless souls he inspired. While Dr. Charles Stanley's sermons offered comfort and hope to millions, what unfolded after his passing unsettled many who revered him. Beneath the tributes and glowing eulogies, unsettling details began to surface, details that only came to light once the official reports were revealed. What was uncovered sparked whispers, doubts, and a veil of mystery over a man so many believed they fully understood. Charles Stanley's story began far from the spotlight, in the harsh realities of the Great Depression. Born on September 25, 1932, in Dry Fork, Virginia, his life was marked by tragedy before it had truly begun. At just 9 months old, he lost his father, leaving his mother, Rebecca, to raise him alone. Years later, she remarried a truck driver named John Hall, and together they welcomed a daughter, Susie. But it was not material comfort that shaped young Charles, it was faith. His grandfather, Reverend George Washington Stanley, carried a deep spiritual legacy that left an indelible mark on the boy. And at just 12 years old, Charles experienced a profound religious awakening that set the course for his life, a moment of rebirth that would ultimately lead him to become one of the most powerful voices in American Christianity. By the age of 14, Charles Stanley had already stepped into the pulpit, igniting a lifelong calling that would define every chapter of his journey. Education became the cornerstone of his path. In 1956, at just 23 years old, he graduated from the University of Richmond with a Bachelor of Arts degree. His passion for theology drove him further, leading him to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas, where he earned his Master of Divinity. Determined to deepen his knowledge, he pursued advanced studies, ultimately receiving both a Master of Theology and a Doctorate of Theology from Luther Rice Seminary. Stanley's ministry truly found its footing in Atlanta. In 1969, he joined the staff of the First Baptist Church of Atlanta, and just 2 years later, in 1971, he rose to become its senior pastor, a role that would define him for decades. But Stanley wasn't content to reach only those within the walls of his church. He saw the power of media as a tool to spread faith beyond borders. In 1972, he launched his television program The Chapel Hour, planting the seeds of what would soon become a global ministry. By 1977, he officially founded In Touch Ministries, an organization dedicated to deepening people's relationship with God and strengthening churches worldwide. 1 year later, in 1978, his program went national through the Christian Broadcasting Network, marking the beginning of a media empire that would eventually reach audiences in over 50 languages across the globe. In Touch expanded its reach to include radio, magazines, and the Internet, impacting millions of lives. Throughout his ministry, Stanley addressed everyday subjects like family, finances, personal challenges, and relationships, consistently emphasizing his core belief that the Bible is the true Word of God. His straightforward yet heartfelt preaching style established him as one of the most esteemed evangelical figures in the nation. In 1985, Stanley was elected as the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, one of the largest Protestant organizations in the United States. Even as he aged, he continued to influence the future of the church. In 2017, he appointed Anthony George as his eventual successor at First Baptist Atlanta. Then, in September 2020, after nearly 5 decades of leadership, he stepped down as senior pastor and took on the title of Pastor Emeritus. While remaining engaged with In Touch Ministries, Charles Stanley's theology was rooted in conservative evangelical traditions and dispensationalist beliefs. He often reminded others of the wisdom passed down from his grandfather, particularly the principle of obeying God and leaving the consequences to Him. This mindset shaped his life and inspired millions to maintain their faith despite personal hardships, family issues, and struggles at home. Charles Stanley was not only a pastor to countless individuals but also a devoted family man. He and his wife, Anna J. Stanley, were married for over 40 years and had 2 children together, their daughter Becky and their son Andy Stanley. Andy would eventually follow in his father's footsteps, becoming the pastor of North Point Community Church in Alpharetta, Georgia, which grew to be one of the largest churches in the United States. In addition to his ministry, Charles Stanley had another passion: photography. He loved capturing the world through his camera lens, and many of his photographs were featured in In Touch magazine calendars and other ministry publications. Behind the pulpit, Charles Stanley inspired millions. But behind closed doors, his personal life was far more fragile. His marriage to Anna began to unravel in the early 1990s. In 1992, Anna first filed for divorce, though the couple briefly attempted reconciliation by converting it into a legal separation. For a moment, it seemed hope lingered, that perhaps the fractures could be mended. But by 1995, the strain proved too great. Anna filed once more, and this time the separation felt final. The tension even rippled into his ministry, as Atlanta's local Moody radio station temporarily pulled his daily broadcast, worried that the fallout of a permanent divorce would damage his reputation. By 2000, after years of painful distance, a judge signed the final decree. Their marriage was over. The divorce sent shockwaves through the Southern Baptist Convention. After all, Stanley had once declared that if he ever divorced, he would step down as pastor. Yet when the moment came, something extraordinary happened: his congregation stood firmly behind him. With near unanimous support, they voted for him to remain in the pulpit, proving their loyalty was unshaken, even in the face of scandal. He was shielded from their decision by the church's bylaws, which stated that he could continue in the role provided he didn't get married again. This period of Stanley's life demonstrated the tension between his own hardships and his work in public ministry. In a religious culture that placed a high value on marriage, divorce had repercussions even if it was a personal and painful matter. Stanley continued to lead his congregation with the same fervor and commitment despite the criticism. On November 10, 2014, Anna Stanley, who had supported him during his early years in ministry, passed away. Both of their children carried on their parents' work in different ways, but Andy in particular had an impact on modern evangelical ministry on his own. Charles was a member of influential social circles outside of his family. He even served on the board of the Moral Majority, an organization founded by Jerry Falwell, with whom he was strong friends. This connection showed how much Stanley was respected and trusted by the most influential religious figures in America at the time. Behind the pulpit, the challenges. There was some upheaval in Dr. Charles Stanley's personal life, especially in the Southern Baptist Convention, SBC, and his own church. Stanley was one of the most well-known spokespersons for the SBC during its bitter conservative comeback in the early 1980s. Chosen president of SBC in 1984 and 1985. He served as the leader of a movement aimed at displacing liberals and moderates from positions of authority in denominational organizations and seminaries. Stanley even acknowledged that seminary presidents and state convention newspapers, as well as all other liberal and moderate political forces inside the Southern Baptist Convention, were against me. Despite the stress, he never gave up because he believed that his leadership was motivated by a greater purpose. However, this also applied to First Baptist Church in Atlanta. When he became the lead pastor in 1971, there were severe divisions within the church. Even anti-Stanley pamphlets were given to churchgoers by the executive committee members who were uneasy with his Pentecostal roots and Orthodox beliefs. When 2,000 supporters rushed forward in support after Stanley's speech and an altar call, 300 opposition members left, bringing the situation to a close. When Stanley was physically assaulted by the committee chairman, the scenario escalated. However, he received enough votes to stay pastor thanks to the support of hundreds more members, even if hundreds more protested. Regarding social issues and theology, Stanley didn't mince words. He was a staunch conservative who opposed liberal drift and feminism. He disagreed with SBC's position statements on women in the 1990s, especially on leadership, but he clarified that he didn't make any formal protests, attributing the miscommunication to misconceptions. Long-standing disputes were also subject to Stanley's right-wing viewpoint. After his vocal anti-LGBTQ remarks sparked controversy, including accusations that AIDS was God's punishment and that homosexuality was destructive activity, he declined to accept an honor from a Jewish organization. Stanley supported the Jewish National Fund's decision to withdraw the award so as not to further polarize the public. Despite all, Stanley remained a conservative leader who stood firmly with leaders who opposed the liberalizing trends in the SBC and was associated with Moral Majority leader Jerry Falwell. He was adamant about the Bible's infallibility and the importance of unwavering theological devotion notwithstanding opposition or disagreement. Adherence to the moral majority. A significant aspect of Dr. Charles Stanley's ministry was his affiliation with the Moral Majority, a politically conservative Christian organization founded by Jerry Falwell in 1979. Stanley was a founding board member who assisted in organizing evangelical Christians for political action, particularly in support of conservative causes such as the Equal Rights Amendment and opposition to abortion. Others who believed that religious leaders and political engagement should be kept apart criticized this relationship. Critics contended that such involvement would politicize religion and jeopardize the Church's spiritual mission. Stanley and other Moral Majority leaders, however, believed that in order to uphold traditional Christian principles in public life, they had to get involved in politics. When it helped elect Ronald Reagan and steered the political winds for evangelical Christians in the 1980s, the Moral Majority had its day. Despite its eventual demise in 1989, the group's impact on American politics and the contributions of figures like Stanley are still up for debate when assessing how politics and religion interact. Ministry women. As a conservative, Dr. Charles Stanley. Comprehension of the role that women play in church leadership. He believed that the pastoral position was only for men, even if he supported the use of women in the church in many roles. The attitude, which has generated controversy within the denomination, aligned with the Southern Baptist Convention. The conservative revival of the SBC in the 1990s aimed to reaffirm traditional doctrinal positions, including the role of women in ministry. The denomination at the time placed a strong emphasis on male headship and insisted that men should be in charge of pastoral care. In 1995, as a result of this, female SBC leaders such as Molly Marshall and Diana Garland were forced to leave Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. The denomination's commitment to its interpretation of the biblical teachings on gender roles was demonstrated by these instances. The official SBC policy was in line with Dr. Stanley's position. He declared his support for the 2000 Baptist Faith and Message, which holds that only men who meet the requirements of Scripture are eligible to serve as pastors. However, he also acknowledged that parts of the document's comments might be read incorrectly and said he did not agree with everything that was said in the wives' submission to their husbands. His general support of the SBC's stance on women in ministry was clear in spite of all these nuances. Within the SBC, some have criticized this conservative attitude. For instance, Saddleback Church, the SBC's largest congregation, was expelled in 2023 for hiring a woman to serve as a teaching pastor. The denomination's unwavering adherence to its interpretation of biblical teachings on gender roles was demonstrated by this action. His fortune, Dr. Stanley led an open-minded and devoutly religious life. Despite not being among the wealthiest televangelists, his financial situation was remarkable, especially considering his commitment to leading a simple life. In his senior years, Dr. Stanley was paid over $500,000 a year by In Touch Ministries, a non-profit organization he established in 1972. Despite his substantial money, he led a somewhat modest personal life. His estimated net worth of $1.5 million shows that he prioritized his ministry over accumulating personal wealth. Under his direction, In Touch Ministries expanded quickly. The ministry earned about $97 million annually in 2019 and has over $113 million in net worth. These figures demonstrate how well his broadcasts were received and how effectively his ministry ran. The foundation of Dr. Stanley's financial philosophy was the idea that money must serve a higher good. He frequently emphasized the dangers of consumerism and the necessity of sound financial management. His teachings encouraged believers to view money as a tool for ministry rather than a means of achieving resilience, personal prosperity, or health struggles. Preaching, writing, and leading his ministry until his death, Dr. Charles Stanley was renowned for his diligent work ethic. However, he was not immune to severe medical conditions. He was sent to the hospital with pneumonia and diseased lungs, which led to renal failure, according to a poignant feature profile made public after his passing. Those sudden, ominous news arrived quickly, and his usually strong demeanor abruptly changed. Even those close to him acknowledged that for more than 3 years, illness had occasionally disrupted his public ministry prior to that most recent hospitalization. He would have episodes so severe that he needed help standing up and felt as though he was dying. Even though he wasn't physically well, he insisted on maintaining his spiritual life by continuing to write and write to others throughout that time. Stanley's power prevailed in each of his health conflicts. Until his final days, he kept working on his personal correspondence, ministry management, and preaching. His strength was profoundly spiritual as well as physical. His unwavering ministry, severe health difficulties, and blend demonstrate how strong his commitment is. His health was not discussed in public very often. Instead, we saw a guy who persevered in his calling despite the hardship. His occasional layoffs were not a sign of failure, but rather of weakness that further enhanced his continued efforts. His accomplishments. In addition to decades of service, Dr. Charles Stanley's career was marked by several honors and accolades that demonstrated his prominence in the media and religious worlds. In 1988, he was inducted into the National Religious Broadcasters Hall of Fame, one of the first notable distinctions bestowed upon him. This prize acknowledged his pioneering work in Christian broadcasting and his commitment to using media to reach people for the gospel. His inclusion on this esteemed list demonstrated that his peers recognized the impact of his ministry beyond the local church in Atlanta. The following year, in 1989, Stanley was named the Religious Heritage of America's Clergyman of the Year. This distinction recognized him as a public person who consistently promoted Christian ideals in American society, in addition to his role as a religious leader. It was an event that demonstrated the impact his ministry had on religious communities across the nation outside of his faith. Stanley's ministry was once again recognized by the National Religious Broadcasters in 1993, when they named In Touch the year's top television producer. By this time, Christians all over the world were well familiar with his television show, delivering teachings and lectures in a way that millions of people can understand. Stanley stood out as a communicator who could engage a modern audience because of his ability to combine a deep spiritual understanding with media acumen. In Touch achieved yet another significant milestone in 1999 when it was named the Radio Show of the Year. This was proof of the ministry's success on multiple platforms, showing that Stanley's message was disseminated via radio as well as television. It strengthened his belief that the gospel should be successfully spread via every media, including print, radio, and television. Stanley was well known for his books in addition to his radio. In 2017, he received an award from Thomas Nelson Publishing for selling more than 3.5 million copies of his novels. His popularity demonstrated his ability to uplift readers with both spiritual wisdom and useful guidance. His works on faith, prayer, and life principles have helped many people apply what they've learned about Christianity to their daily lives. These honors collectively demonstrate the breadth of the doctor's influence. Whether he was preaching, writing, or broadcasting, Stanley had a profound effect on the Christian community around the world. Because of his dedication to spreading his faith and his innovative work in the media, he not only earned respect but also created a legacy that motivates coming generations. The last few years. In September 2020, Dr. Charles Stanley announced that he was leaving his position as senior pastor of First Baptist Church of Atlanta and becoming pastor emeritus after more than 50 years of shepherding his church. "I'm so grateful to serve as your pastor for more than 50 years, he said in a heartfelt video message played during a Sunday service. He added, "Even though he had loved being in the position very much, I know in my heart this season has come to an end." He said he wasn't retiring, despite his resignation. As part of a planned succession, he would instead turn his attention to In Touch Ministries, the international outreach he established in 1977, declaring, "I'll continue to preach the gospel as long as God allows." Anthony George, the associate pastor since 2012, was appointed senior pastor, and Anthony gave a modest homage to Dr. During the celebration of Stanley's half-century of service, the church held a special event where his children, Becky and Andy Stanley, senior pastor of North Point Community Church, gave personal testimonies. Stanley thanked him for his unwavering courage and dedicated leadership, and he described Stanley's life as a legacy he was humbled to pursue. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp even issued a proclamation recognizing his extraordinary impact. After the changeover, Stanley remained active in Touch Ministries, regularly sharing on digital platforms and conceiving new projects, but he did step back from daily church leadership. The turning point was when he decided to devote his remaining energy to teaching and mentoring through his international outreach, which allowed him to continue doing what he loved most in his later years, broadcasting biblical messages to people worldwide without having to run a megachurch. His teachings remained consistent, emphasizing the importance of trusting God with all of one's heart, even in the face of change. The world mourned the passing of one of the most revered spiritual leaders in the world in the early hours of April 18, 2023. Dr. Charles Stanley, the founder of In Touch Ministries and the legendary pastor emeritus of Atlanta's First Baptist Church, died quietly in his Atlanta home at the age of 90. Christian leaders, churchgoers, and followers lamented his death, remembering his unwavering commitment to sharing the gospel with everyone. His death marked the end of a truly remarkable 65-year ministry life, a life dedicated to sharing faith and guiding millions of people worldwide. Word of his passing spread quickly, and tributes poured in from all over the world. He had a unique place in Christian broadcasting, according to many. The Christian Post called him a pioneer of gospel ministry, noting that he used media to reach people outside of his church. Southern Baptist Convention leaders acknowledged his impact, as both former and current presidents wrote tributes to him that praised his dedication, wisdom, and impact on the faith community. There has been a few speculation and interest in the days following his demise as to what may have led to his demise. The reliable post-mortem document turned into not launched immediately, and there have been no designated medical findings disclosed at the time of his loss of life. It turned into stated that health practitioner Stanley had surpassed away peacefully during sleep with no reports of an extended contamination or hospitalization. His own family individuals together with his son Andy Stanley, who's the president of North Factor Ministries, left tearful messages attesting to the unhappiness and appreciation for his life. They highlighted his unshakable religion and his long dedication to teaching human beings approximately Jesus Christ. His church leaders and ministers from all over the globe also expressed their condolences, recounting non-public anecdotes approximately how Dr. Stanley's sermons, teachings, and writings had prompted their ministries and impacted their lives. The media participated in his birthday party of life, reporting obituaries that advised the story of his transition from a timid boy in Dry Fork, Virginia into a global evangelist. Publications consisting of Christianity Nowadays and the related press emphasized his progressive efforts with In Touch Ministries and recommended his dedication to sharing the message of the gospel with as massive an audience as viable, utilizing radio, television, and online media to percentage his teachings around the arena. Dr. Charles Stanley's loss of life honestly was the give-up of an era in evangelical ministry. Even though a whole lot of what took place in his remaining days is kept private, his legacy lives on via the countless human beings he touched, the training he wrote down, and the ministries he assisted in organizing. As the sector mourns his passing, it also rejoices in an existence properly lived, one dedicated completely to faith, to serving, and to main others to God. Dr. Charles Stanley's existence showed willpower, faith, and the quiet strength of influence. Past the awards, broadcasts, and books, what made Stanley awesome became his capability to hook up with people on a deeply personal level. He wasn't just a voice at the radio, or a determine on television. He changed into a person who understood the struggles of regular lifestyles and provided guidance grounded in religion. His teachings frequently advocated listeners and readers to technique existence with braveness, area, and consider in God. And that message resonated across generations. One of the lesser recognized elements of Stanley's lifestyles was his dedication to mentorship. In the course of his ministry, he made it a point to guide young pastors and leaders, assisting them navigate the challenges of ministry and private existence. A lot of modern influential Christian leaders score him with shaping their technique to religion and leadership. His effect, consequently, extends a long way past his very own congregation or ministry. It lives on through the paintings of those he mentored. Stanley additionally had a unique capacity to stability way of life and innovation. Whilst firmly rooted in conservative theology, he embraced new techniques to reach humans from television and radio to print and digital media. He turned into ahead of his time in expertise that sharing the message of faith required no longer just expertise of Scripture, however additionally in knowledge of the way humans speak in a contemporary world. This foresight helped his ministry develop globally, touching lives in ways that few pastors gain, even in personal. Stanley's life pondered consistency and discipline. The ones close to him regularly talked about his routine and attention, whether it was in take a look at, prayer, or time spent getting ready sermons. It became this discipline mixed with actual compassion that gave him credibility and authenticity. Humans didn't simply pay attention to him due to the fact he became well known. They listened due to the fact they felt he absolutely cared about their non-secular nicely being. In the end, health practitioner Charles Stanley's legacy is one among enduring have an impact on. He showed that leadership isn't about private glory, however about provider, humility, and staying power. His existence reminds us that making a difference is often about small, regular efforts that build trust, encourage others, and create lasting trade. Even as he is not with us, the standards he lived by means of and the training he taught continue to inspire countless people to live with faith, courage, and purpose. And that is a look at the super lifestyles and legacy of Dr. Charles Stanley. From his early beginnings in Virginia to becoming an international voice of religion, his tale indicates the electricity of dedication, belief, and carrier. In case you located this video insightful, inspiring, or just need to learn extra approximately influential figures like medical Dr. Stanley, make sure to hit that like button, and remember to enroll in our channel and activate notifications so that you in no way leave out a tale that matters. Thank you for looking and we will see you inside the subsequent video.